let's move to this story, and it's back to our old friend vaping and tobacco. The Tobacco and Vapes Bill, which would ban tobacco sales to anyone born after 2009, faces challenges as it could breach post-Brexit agreements governing Northern Ireland. The case illustrates how, despite leaving the EU, British law in some areas remains intertwined with European frameworks. Let's get a word from Sir Robert Buckland KC, former Solicitor General and Northern Ireland Affairs. Good afternoon to you, Robert. Welcome to the programme.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Nice to have you with us. I actually thought, and I've kind of obviously somehow missed something. I thought this proposed bill had been done away with. I thought they weren't going with this if you're born after a certain age thing, but apparently it's alive and well.
Yeah, it is. New Zealand passed a similar law, but then the new government in New Zealand got rid of it. So now the UK is the only country in the world that's going for a generational ban. Our friends in the Irish Republic wanted to do something similar, but guess what? They were advised that it would be against EU law and the single market law on tobacco products for them to have a generational ban. So they're going for raising the ban to 21. And you can already see perhaps some of the problems that could exist between Northern Ireland and the Republic along that border, where if you're in a few years' time you're caught short for a ciggy, you can cross the border to Donegal and get fags, perfectly lawfully, but not in Northern Ireland. And, what does that mean? Well, I think it means a bit of a black market, potentially, to say the least.
I think it is.
Is pokery we've seen before in that part of the world.
Is there evidence that this kind of legislation actually reduces smoking?
Look, there is evidence to suggest that smoking rates do fall off if you prevent youngsters from getting access to tobacco at an early age. I think the fact that Britain is now the only country to be doing a generational ban, that is, by the time, our kids are in their 50s, let's say, they won't be able to buy cigarettes. I think we're in a very different world from the one where quite clearly and understandably we want, for public health reasons, to try and make sure our kids don't get, hooked on tobacco.
I mean, I get that, but I suppose it does mean that people will be ID'd all their life, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, in years to come, when, people of our maturity, should we say, Ian, I'm not going to presume how old you are, but
26.
I'm older than I look. I accept that. Are you going to be ID'd at 57? And look, we know how the world works, and it's a sad reality that if people want a product, they'll get a product. And my worry is that in Northern Ireland in particular, and I've been looking at this carefully from a legal point of view.
Sure.
And I think people on the show, watching the show know all about the Wondsor framework and the protocol. Look, EU law still applies for many reasons in Northern Ireland, and one of those laws is this Tobacco Products Directive. And I think that it's all very well for the government to be passing UK-wide legislation, but they could come a cropper in court if they're found that, in fact, this particular provision now breaches EU law. And they need to come straight about this and tell House of Lords, who are dealing with this bill at the moment, they're debating it, that ministers need to explain how it is they're going to overcome this legal hurdle, rather than just passing a law and then finding that they get embroiled in legal arguments in the courts over in Northern Ireland. That would be a good look, I think, and the government needs to act now to create clarity.
Yeah, and I guess this is, there's lots of areas, as you rightly say, this curious, clunky and almost immovable problem with the Brexit deal. And, it was debated all over the place for forever. But it is these kind of issues that are cropping up all the time. This one happens to be about tobacco, and obviously there's many grumpy people in the north that are disappointed that this is the case and how it is, but nonetheless it is where we're at, and I guess this is going to carry on for the rest of time unless Ireland becomes united, if that's the not too controversial a term.
Well, that would be one way of dealing with it. Not one personally I would support as a unionist, but look, there are solutions to this, and they're political ones. There's a joint committee that exists between the UK and the EU, where UK ministers and Commission officials can negotiate to decide what's actually in the protocol, and things can come out of that, So it's not beyond the wit of both sides to actually negotiate an exemption here, but that needs to be done, I think, quickly before this law comes into force in order to make things regular. Otherwise, I think they will fall foul of this problem, and it's another avoidable banana skin, frankly.
Indeed.
If I was in government, I'd be wanting to try and avoid, bearing in mind all the banana skins they're slipping on at the moment. Do they really need another one like this? Get it right now, and then whatever one's view, at least the law is tidy, and hopefully you don't end up with this black market that I think is going to develop.
Should this have been worked out in the, I mean, I don't want to go into too many other territories, but should this have been worked out, Robert, in the Good Friday or the Belfast Agreement, that, bearing in mind, when you consider when Blair and, Clinton and Mo Molan and everybody was involved in that momentous moment, prior to that, many political parties, including the Lib Dems, had talked about having a referendum on membership of the European Union. It's not as if it was a new thing. I know it didn't happen for many years later, but it had been talked about lots of times from all parties. I would have thought someone would have slapped in a clause somewhere, or certainly raised in any other business, what happens if there is a referendum on leaving or not leaving the EU. Maybe it came up and they thought, we'll deal with that when we come to it.
I genuinely think, we're going back to 1998, and I don't think anybody had in their mind then anything other than the fact that both the UK and the Republic would be in the same single market. I don't think we can give people that sort of clairvoyance back then. But I tell you what did happen back then was that there was an acknowledgement that, rightly or wrongly, the Republican Catholic community did not have the same faith in the police and the security services as the Loyalist Unionist community. And there needed, therefore, to be a shared sense of human rights and civil liberties. That, I think, was achieved by the Good Friday Agreement. And, of course, that then led to that important clause in the Windsor Framework, Article 2, that says there shall be no diminution and reduction in those rights. And that's where you get the problem, emerging. I think those of us, and I campaigned for Remain, I think everybody knows that. I did say at the time that dealing with the Northern Ireland border was going to be a really tricksy problem. And I think for those people who said it was going to be a walk in the park, it was never going to be that. It was always going to have this imperfection. And I think what ministers have to do now is look at each issue on its merits and try and negotiate exemptions so that people and businesses in Northern Ireland are not disadvantaged. Because at the moment, despite the improvement of the Windsor Framework, we've still got too many businesses being disadvantaged in that part of what is our United Kingdom.
Absolutely bang on. Listen, Robert, great to have you on, sir. We will speak again. Thank you for your time, Sir Robert Buckland KC, former Solicitor General, former chair of the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee. I don't know what made me think, every now and again there's a little bit of knowledge that has just alluded to. I thought they ditched this idea. Did it come in originally under the Tories? So if you're born after 2009, and that includes, thankfully, both my kids, you will not be able to buy cigarettes or even vapes other than on the black market. So you would be persistently and continually ID'd to buy either of those products. They'd have to make that an automatic something somehow. Don't know how they would do it. Let's go back.